Does it work now? Yeah, right. That's better. Right, okay. So, back to the beginning, I guess. I'm going to talk about automating Keycloak configuration for compliance and agile development. First, a couple of words about myself. I'm an IT security engineer at Relaxdays. We're an e-commerce company, and yeah. In my free time, I'm contributing to Keycloak, of course, NixOS, and a couple of other open source projects. So yeah, I'm kind of doing a lot. And I'm also maintaining free and privacy-respecting services. Yeah. So first of all, what is our infrastructure at Relaxdays? This is important for what we're trying to do, actually. We're running a heavily microservice-based architecture. Keycloak is our single sign-on system, and every single microservice has its own Keycloak client for us. So this is currently around 160 clients we're managing in our Keycloak realm, and we're configuring Keycloak with 2 separate realms, one for staging, one for production, and yeah, of course, most of our actual user and group data is synchronized from LDAP. Yeah, and of course, the important thing is with every single microservice with a Keycloak client using authorization services, there's a lot of configuration to be done in Keycloak. And the authorization we're using is mostly based around LDAP groups, client roles for audiences and tokens, so we can pass tokens around everywhere. And yeah, that's the authorization we're using. The actual configuration for Keycloak itself is mostly done by the development teams themselves. So usually the team leads are the ones configuring Keycloak clients and configuring permissions, configuring authorization. And of course, this scales, but yeah, we need to verify that actually the configuration is correct, that it works, and that it's compliant to our own rules. So the goal we're trying to solve here, or we're trying to achieve here, is how can we automate this? How can we actually automate verifying configuration, and actually at that point we can update and we can check and compare configuration actually. So what are we actually doing? We're checking client configuration, of course, as I said. That is, we're checking protocol mappers, authorization, configured authentication flows, whatever. And we can do that automatically on a schedule. And we can do that whenever teams deploy something new. We can also update clients for configuration changes in Keycloak itself. So for example, in Keycloak 22, I think, I'm not entirely sure anymore, the default name for the client ID claim we're using in one of our applications actually changed. So newly created clients have client underscore ID, and clients created with Keycloak versions 21 and earlier have client ID in camel case. And yeah, we need one single claim in our tokens, so we can actually update the Keycloak configuration so all old clients get the new default. We can also compare client configurations between our 2 staging and production realms. So every team that wants to deploy something from staging to production can check that they've actually set the configuration in production correctly, and they can, and that's not yet implemented actually, but that's something we're still working on. They can automatically apply all changes from staging to production in the Keycloak configuration. We're doing this because exporting from staging and importing to production for single clients doesn't work very well. It's a feature Keycloak has, but it's not really that good, in my opinion. And it requires deleting the client first before you can import the client to production. And that's usually more downtime than actually just changing things using the API. And yeah, we are building a tool using the admin API, using the OpenAPI spec. Alexander actually mentioned that one earlier in his keynote. So first of all, a little tangent about OpenAPI itself. OpenAPI is like machine-readable API specification in YAML or JSON. Should contain all API endpoints. I know that it should, because, well, the Keycloak OpenAPI spec isn't yet complete. And it's usually generated automatically from the code and can also be used to generate an API client, which is what we're doing here. So in Keycloak's case, the OpenAPI spec has been available since Keycloak 22, but only as an intermediate artifact for generating the HTML documentation. So the HTML API documentation you can look at is generated from this, and everything that's wrong with the OpenAPI spec is also wrong in the HTML documentation, sadly. Currently, the specification is missing a lot of endpoints, and those that are there are sometimes wrongly documented. That is, return status codes are wrong, or return bodies are just like generic object instead of actually the data that Keycloak returns. And yeah, that's where I've been working on for the last few months. I've opened a couple of pull requests, and thanks again to Alexander for reviewing them, to Keycloak to improve the OpenAPI and thus also improve the HTML documentation. And I've also opened some pull requests to Progenitor, the library I'm using to generate an API client from that OpenAPI spec. And yeah, the OpenAPI spec currently is in a usable state, I'd say. It's going to be available in Keycloak 24 with like a little warning to say that this is still a preview, but it's going to be available, which is nice. So I don't have to compile this myself anymore. And the current thing I'm doing is I'm using Nix to build Keycloak from a specific version, apply specific patches to it, and then get the OpenAPI spec. So this is very automated currently, and I can generate the spec files for basically every version since 22. Yeah, and then I'm using, as I said, Progenitor to generate a Rust API client. So I can actually just interface with the Keycloak API from Rust. I've built high-level abstractions around this to handle like login, access tokens, things like this. And yeah, the actual CLI tool I'm currently using to do something useful is on top of that. And I think everything up to the high-level abstractions is something we're still trying to open source. It's not yet open source, but that's what our goal is for this tool. The tool itself is too specific to actually be open sourced currently. So yeah, that's probably not going to happen, sadly. Now, short time for a demonstration. Yeah, there we go. So this is just Keycloak running locally in dev mode. I think I'll zoom in a bit. And yeah, we have like 3 realms: master, staging, internal. Internal. And staging currently is just basic realm, same as internal. Both of those have a local realm admin user to administrate those, but I'm using the master admin to actually show this. And yeah, as you can see, there's nothing there. We can we can create some client in both of those realms. Just click through this. The important thing is that client IDs are the same. That's how we're comparing clients between realms. So we just have like a basic test client in both realms now. And wait, no, there we go. So we can now compare this. I'm going to show off this one first. There's just like an environment file in this case, Keycloak base URL realm to use client ID for login. And yeah, the client ID, again, username, password to log into the configured realm. And that's all the configuration there is currently, or that's needed for this. And we're comparing the test client to the internal realm. And currently, yeah, there's just, I've enabled debugging output, so we can actually see everything that's being queried from the Keycloak API. We can see that multiple clients are resolved, like multiple UUIDs are resolved here. So it doesn't actually matter what the UUID is. We are checking from the user visible client ID. So this is actually something really important because no one is going to type in those UUIDs. And yeah, if we change anything now, for example, we go to staging. We can, for example, enable authorization. Just enable it. There's no need to configure anything. And if we rerun this tool now, it warns that there's actually differences between those realms, and it shows which fields are different in the configuration. So we can see that in staging, authorization is enabled. In internal, it's not configured at all. The Keycloak API sometimes just doesn't return anything. It just leaves fields off. So the default in Rust is just like none, which for those of you who don't know Rust that much is kind of a null value. Yeah, but not quite. Anyway, so we can see that also this one change of enabling authorization and client login enabled also service accounts, of course. It changed that it's a public client, it's not anymore. And yeah, that's things we can actually look at now and we can immediately make visible. We can also change basically anything else here, at least the things that Keycloak currently, or that the OpenAPI spec currently exposes. So for example, authorization has some resources here, and the mappings, like policies, aren't yet in the OpenAPI spec available. So that's something that's not yet implemented for the client comparison. But yeah. We also have names and descriptions, which are not compared because, well, yeah, you usually don't want to compare those to each other. Yeah.
The goal is just to compare clients between different systems. The question is, wouldn't be, if I want to use this, wouldn't be a better approach to use something like configuration as code, as you so you can define all the clients in one view and transform it to another view. And
yeah. So the question was, We're comparing clients between realms, so wouldn't it be better to just use configuration as code here? Yes, that would indeed be a nice approach. But the problem here we're dealing with is developers just like to make small incremental changes in the admin UI. And configuration as code, yes, it's a great tool, but people often just change things in the admin UI and don't know anymore what they changed. Like they changed something on a Friday, they test it, they come back on Monday, and they don't know what exactly it was they actually changed. They didn't move it to the configuration. Yeah, that's an issue. So actually looking at the real configuration in the admin UI and comparing those two configurations is, in my opinion, still a very valuable tool to have. And yeah, so that's still kind of required. Yeah, so I can change a lot of things here. I can, for example, create a client role. I think, whatever. Let's take this one. That's interesting. That was an interesting error. Okay, let's see what the tool actually does here. I'm not sure. Yeah, doesn't pick that up because something is wrong with Keycloak. This is, by the way, just a Keycloak instance from the standard upstream Docker image. So I'm not entirely sure what went wrong creating a role. Yeah. But for example, we can create things here, and those should actually, we can go back to the old claim name. That's a thing. Yeah, and I think this doesn't compare anything actually, but the other use case I showed, the check, what was it? I think it was client ID. No, it's not the client ID. There we go. And yeah, that's the error message for checking the old client ID. And we can, I hope this works now, fix all. So yeah, this should have been changed to the new one now. And if we refresh this, yeah, it's now back to the new default. So this is a tool we can use to update the client configuration from older Keycloak releases to the defaults of newer Keycloak releases. So newly created clients have the same configuration by default than the current existing clients. Yeah. Right. So. So, future steps for this, I'm still working on completing the OpenAPI documentation, or at least trying to. Help wanted, of course. If you need the OpenAPI documentation for something, or if you're using the HTML documentation, you can help out. It's usually just some Java annotations required in Keycloak itself to generate OpenAPI specifications for this, sorry. And yeah, currently this is all just one big chunk of Rust code. So I'm still working on separating the library from the actual front-end tool. and maybe also write a more friendly tool for this. And yeah, currently the high-level abstractions are just very basic, are just what I need for the comparison, for the checks. That's all there's to it right now. But yeah, it works for this use case. And I'm still working on getting more high-level abstractions implemented. And when that's done, I hope I can publish this as a Rust crate. Yeah. So a couple of links. First, the pull request that actually publishes the OpenAPI spec. That one was merged for Keycloak 24, as I already said. The tracking issue for still open differences between the OpenAPI specification and the actual admin API. And if you want to contact me, insert the protocol appropriate separators for email, matrix, Mastodon, whatever. Right, and I think now it's time for more questions, if you have any.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. And yeah, I can feel your pain with developers not using configuration as code with the same issue. So my question is, how do you handle authorization? So we do something comparable. We use Terraform to do it, but we can't open up the admin UI for the developers because we don't have authorization good enough. So you can change clients from other teams. How do you handle that?
Yeah, we're actually using the fine-grained permissions, which is still a preview feature, I think. And we've enabled that. And for now, the current way we're dealing with this is team leads and higher are allowed to create new clients. And they need to give their own team members the permission to edit those clients if they want it. Some teams don't. So in some teams, it's exclusively the team lead who has to do all changes. But yeah, the fine-grained permission system actually works fine. I think it's something that could be stabilized soon. I'm not sure.
About the OpenAPI. The OpenAPI, I think it opens the door for other programming languages. Not only Java people can use it, which is great.
Yeah.
You showed that the clients work quite well with the OpenAPI. Can you name any other entities that you're using that you say they're already documented in a shape that they're ready to use?
Well, I wouldn't say clients are yet fully documented, sadly. Especially the authorization stuff is still a bit undocumented. Realms are actually documented very well, I think, like the general realm settings, stuff like this. And users are also quite usable, but there's no use case for me personally to actually use the users in the admin API.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you could show an OpenAPI spec source code if people want to have a look at it. I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with it.
I mean, sure. So as you can see, this is a very long JSON file, currently 16,000 lines. And yeah, so first of all, generic information, OpenAPI version, titles, categories. And yeah, then all endpoints are documented like this. So this is the admin realms endpoint, has get method, summary, and parameters. So yeah. And the response in this case is a reference to this realm representation. And there you can see all the possible values the realm representation contains. And this is what you would get, or a subset of this is what you would get returned from the admin API if you were to query the realm settings. Yeah, just short overview.
Thank you. Any further questions? Could you?
We're so lucky that we already have the configuration as code from an older system that we're going to import to Keycloak. I'm assuming that would be possible using the API.
Can you repeat the first part, please?
We already have a configuration for, like, I think a couple hundred clients from an older system that we need to import into Keycloak.
Yeah.
So assuming that would be possible using the API.
Yeah, sure. It should be possible.
Just have to write the code for it first, but...
Yeah, that's true. But actually, the admin UI is just using the API in the background, so everything you can do there would also work in the API, of course.
Thank you. Any further
I
questions?
think there was another question over there.
Yeah, my question is, when you say your teams can actually create new clients, is there any specific feature you're using? Is it just via the UI, or do you use this dynamic client registration feature or anything similar?
No, most of our teams use just the admin UI itself.
Do you have any experience with the dynamic client registration? Have you tried that? Or?
I've looked at it a little bit, but that's not really something I have a lot of experience with.
Thanks.
For your question, we tried the client self-service registration. It works quite well for registering the client itself, but it doesn't work for registration of roles. So it's okay for getting started, but not enough yet to make it real, usable.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Any question from the internet? Yeah, then
All right.
thanks
then,
again for your talk. Really
thank
great.
you for your attention, and I think lunchtime.